All right. Nothing important is happening right now, as everyone can see. Just another notch on Deion Sanders' belt. For the record, these are not sunglasses. These are prescription. I don't like wearing hats, and I don't wear sunglasses indoors anyway. So, just so very honored to be a part of Deion Sanders. Oh, wait, Colorado State's winning at half. Yeah, I just for the record, anyone who disparaged my alma mater, you can go straight to hell. That's my comment.
Yes. Strut it a little bit. That's all right.
I still expect us to get killed in the second half, but I'm satisfied. I'm pretty good with what I'm seeing so far. And I'm guessing the Jackrabbit fans who are here to listen to the Jackrabbit postgame show and the FCS postgame show are pretty, by and large, satisfied with what transpired at Target Field today. Aside from maybe the first two or three plays for Drake.
Right.
70-7. You were down there, right?
Yeah.
I'll let you kind of say, what did you think of the atmosphere? I think the final crowd count was about 19. You have to excuse my son. We've had him up a little late. He's a little past his bedtime. We're trying to get him down to sleep a little bit, but tell us a little bit about the atmosphere, how you felt, and what it was like down there. I know the crowd count was 19, and is this maybe a thing for the future?
Well, the atmosphere, especially pregame, the party, with the setup with the loop there. If you're not going to have tailgating, that was a really cool setup to have. I know Cowboy Jacks was just slammed. Like we overheard the manager say we weren't quite expecting this many people, and then they ended up opening up like almost a full floor extra of space just to fit everybody and get everybody drinks and everything. But they did a good job of doing that, so it didn't stay super long lines, which was nice. But that was a really cool deal. The Jack the Loop was awesome. It was cool to be in Target Field. I don't know about. I could see it happening again in the future, for sure. Those aren't my decisions to make, obviously. The atmosphere was kind of odd. It didn't feel college football-y to me, as far as like a college game atmosphere. I think the game atmosphere is better in the Dana. And that's not disparaging Target Field or anything. That was cool. It was cool to be there. It's a beautiful facility. I personally don't love neutral site games, and I don't love games in baseball fields, but trying to be objective on that, it just had almost more of like a touristy type feel from a fan base standpoint. And you're playing Drake, so how into the game are you going to get? At first, everybody was, what the hell's going on when Drake scores that first touchdown? I know that's what we were looking around in the stands going, do we just let that happen in two plays? But it almost looked like for whatever reason, we decided to go with zero safety help over the top, and they happened to take advantage of that. And then the rest of the game, it was kind of cruise control. Our biggest concern was just holding our breath with the turf and the dirt infield, especially when you're playing a team like Drake. It would have been devastating to lose somebody if something happened there, and you could see the turf was getting tore up. I mean, it's a baseball field. It's not necessarily got the turf.
I think I heard it was raining a little bit too at times. A little off and on sprinkles.
Yeah, a little off and on sprinkles. I had like ideal seats where we were right at the edge of where the rain stopped falling. It was like my knees. I never got touched by rain. No, but it was awesome. It was cool. It was unique. I certainly personally wouldn't want it every year. And I think a lot of it will probably come down to dollars and cents as well. Because I don't know exactly what SDSU pulls in from a home game. That's kind of a hard number to figure out by looking at attendance all right, well, how many of them are students? And then, okay, how much you bring concessions and how that all breaks down. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did it again just for the school, just for SDSU itself to get a bigger, stronger presence in the Twin Cities. I could see that happen.
Certainly, and I know, I think the crowd was a little under 19,000. It was 18 and change. Kind of hoping it would maybe go over 20,000, but I guess that's semantics. Right. I'm sure there's a Bison fan who will tell us how many people they drew for their game with Butler a few years ago. That's great. Again, I still think the traveling thing is a little new to SDSU fans because the program hasn't been. These are the golden years of the program,
right?
How many? It's really only been the last 5-10 years where you can go to these FBS games and say, hey, we might have a chance to win this thing, and it's also being sold too as kind of an experience of doing this. So, I think it'll come. I think this was a good alternative in a year where you didn't have an FBS game, and those could be more frequent in years to come. I mean, they're starting to already get the NDSU treatment. Luckily, they do have a lot of games booked out. I know Oklahoma State's going to be a fun one next year. They've got some games with Nebraska. I know Northwestern. I think they're going to open Northwestern Stadium here in a few years, which that could be a winnable game for them too. Although you never know because now with the way these conferences are shifting around,
Brian,
little man's having a fun time.
Brian's a friend of ours who's an NDSU fan, and so he's
2.5 million at the buy. I thought that was a U.S. bank too. I thought it was like 5 million.
Right.
I mean, I've always said it's kind of. I was even saying this on Twitter when somebody commented from Montana State about the crowds they've got at the semifinal games. You just kind of have to take it with a little grain of salt because it's just such a different environment when you're in one of your state's biggest cities. I mean, Fargo has Fargo's basically Sioux Falls metro wise. Missoula, I think, is about 75,000. I think Bozeman's 50. So they can get more people to their game because they're right there. I mean, Brookings, when it's a playoff and it's cold or the weather's bad, you're still drawing a lot from Sioux Falls. So I don't want to make excuses, and I've said this before. I know there's financial issues and all that, but I do hope more people will come up for at least some of the semifinal games, especially if we're seeing another Montana State or I know they would come for NDSU, but if it's Idaho or somebody like that,
right.
But again, I think this was a good alternative. There's other alternatives too. Maybe I know, like I said, you can look at what the Bison are doing. I think they're playing a game in Nashville in another year against Tennessee State, like the Titans Stadium.
So don't let them fool you with that. That is where Tennessee State plays all their home games.
Oh, that is okay.
So they play in Nissan Stadium. It's just
okay.
They did a good job of
camouflaging it.
Yeah. Like, oh, look, we're playing in the Titans Stadium. That's why no, that's a home game for Tennessee State. That's where they play all the time.
I think we had a comment about the Tommies here. I got to look at that. Tommies had kind of a fun game today too. Yeah, I got to look. I was stuck on the private chat there for a minute. Yeah, if we play the Tommies, you could. Well, yeah, you were. I like it. Maybe that was a little bit like a bowl atmosphere. So
right.
I think that's for all those people who are maybe on we need to go to the FBS train. That's kind of what you're going to get in the bowl games. I mean, obviously, if you were to go to the Orange Bowl or a major bowl, it's a little different. But, I think, more than likely at this level, if you're in the MAC or something or whatever SDSU or NDSU would go to, you're going to the Shreveport Bowl or the Boca Raton Bowl. I mean, nice touristy places, but there's no real intensity to a game.
Right.
So it's going to feel more like that. That's kind of a little more what a bowl game is probably. And I've been to a few bowl games like that where there's really not, they're not really that important in the grand scheme. That's kind of what it was. I think that's kind of what I got the gist of it being.
Right. Well, that's a good point because there was a lot of, like reunion type stuff with old classmates and old teammates and things like that happening and all that in the stands and a lot of chatting. It had a lot of your FBS game feel to it, where you have people coming from everywhere. I just think I think it was a pretty good draw, honestly, for SDSU there, because SDSU we don't have in Sioux Falls doesn't have the same sort of connection that Fargo has to MSP, because MSP and Fargo, like, they're the only metro area by Fargo that's a large one, and there's just from having lived there, and you've lived there, there's a huge Minneapolis influence and almost quarter of just that's where NDSU grads go, whereas SDSU you're going Lincoln, Nebraska, like there's a lot more options. So that I think it was a pretty good deal. I do want to address this quick. John Neff, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, says maybe Montana State would be a great game for Target Field. All right, I want to put a kibosh on that. That's not going to happen.
No. And Montana State, any important FCS non-conference game, you got to have it. You got to have it on a home site. I mean, you just want to have that game at on campus sites, unless it's obviously a national championship. That's where home field plays in, and those are the games you want to have on campus. So I mean, I understand his point, but I think that would be this was the perfect opportunity for that. Playing a game against a non-scholarship team, not a high stakes thing. Even St. Thomas, I could even be down with St. Thomas, even though it would kind of be a de facto home game for them, but it's still one you would expect SDSU to win. But I think and like you said, SDSU, I think they only have 7 Minnesota kids. That's why it's maybe a little more important. I'd say maybe it'd be nice if SDSU could play a game down in Nebraska, but there's only one Nebraska venue, and they're going to be playing the Huskers a couple times down the road. So. But I still think it's good to have that Minneapolis exposure. And then, like we said, I think, it was almost 20K today. I think it's good showing. They had a good atmosphere beforehand. I think they've got some connections. Obviously, they got some connections with the Twins, I think, at the front office. So there's a chance they could do it in the future. I don't know if I would ever do the U.S. Bank thing that we saw, or the U.S. Bank Stadium thing. That would be a little too – even NDSU was pretty empty for them, and they got more than they expected. But – it was a cool thing, and I think in years where there's no game, again, no FBS game, it's good to do. But this is where I'll say it's if you really do want to have a FBS, this is kind of what bowl games are like. I'm not, there's, it's not that the playoffs are. Some of those early round playoff games, or when they're blowouts, are not all that great either. But this is it's not much different. There's so few stakes for a lot of those bowl games, and Again, believe it or not, we used to be fairly good. We used to actually be ranked. It was only 9 years ago when I was growing up in college. The best we could ever do when I was a freshman, the last time Colorado was ranked, number 6, they were the sorriest 6th-ranked team in the country when we beat them that year, and our quarterback said that about him after he beat him and spiked a football in their helmet, which actually happened. I retweeted that today. Greatest play ever. If you think there's a rivalry moment, but I digress. But the best we could have done that year, we got up to number 12 or 11 in the rankings before they lost a late season game. The best they could have gone to that year was the Cotton Bowl, which would have been neat. But, it's like compare it to the FCS, where if you're a good team at any level, you can actually compete for a championship. You can play for a playoff. And that's where I say this with respect to NDSU, SDSU. What is the point? I guess you're getting more TV money, you're getting some more exposure, but you're never going to compete for national. Maybe you could if things really broke well, if they continue to let a group of 5 team in the playoff. Maybe if you really got lucky, you could get in the playoff and get murdered at Alabama. But I think it'll move away from even letting those group of 5 teams in. I think we're seeing all these power leagues eventually just form their own thing. So I don't believe for a second there's ever going to be entrance for anybody outside of a few conferences to get into the playoffs. So I just don't think – I think eventually – I've said this a lot. I think eventually a lot of the group of 5 is just going to merge with the upper end of the FCS, and we're going to have basically what amounts to 1A, 1 AA, and 1 AAA, and to use the old classification. So, but I think that's probably a good place to leave a nice comment here. The game was a very good showcase for the school. I think it was. I think people in the Twin Cities came away pretty impressed. We got some feeds from a couple of our affiliates in the Twin Cities, and they liked what they saw. So, I think SDSU did well for themselves there. Game itself, like we said, it got off to a very inconspicuous start. And I saw somebody else had a comment too that I'll go back up and see this. What was it? Somebody had a comment. Yeah, Nebraska keeps kicking their game down the road.
Yeah.
Well, one of those kicks down the road was by COVID. So, unfortunately, I think they would have beaten Scott Frost with Cade Johnson that year, but we'll never know. It was Dustin Helton who made the comment, Drake making history, losing to 2 national champions in 1 week's time, because they lost to the defending NAIA champion Red Raiders of Northwestern of Orange City last week in overtime, 27-24. You got to credit Drake. I mean, a little like my alma mater, they came out swinging, and I'll confess I didn't watch any game tape of their loss to Northwestern, but right away their quarterback threw a bomb to Colin Howard, picks up 53 yards, could have gone for a touchdown, and then a few plays later he hits the same guy again for 35 yards, and I think everybody knew it was probably not going to last, but you go basically 2 plays, 88 yards, you do make a little bit of a statement there.
Yeah, and I think for SDSU fans, when you look at that, it with what you expect to come out as that just is below what your expectation is when you're playing a Drake. So that was kind of the surprising, little bit negative part. I mean, it's hard to be too picky on a game where you win 70-7. However, I will say I'm curious to see how this turns out, because if you remember last year, everybody was talking about where's the big play with the offense, where's the big play with the offense, where's the big explosive play. And yeah, the offense had some, but a lot of them were later in the game. The touchdowns were consistent drives. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But those big plays started to open up as the team gelled and went on. And now I'm starting to wonder if that's almost by design by Lujan, because it kind of has the same feel this year where it's like the offense isn't bad by any stretch. And it's not like it's struggling, but it doesn't have that. We haven't hit those big long plays, and I'm starting to wonder if that's sort of a
they certainly did when they had to, and they certainly did when they had to in the Montana State game. They hit the 40-yard bomb on that final drop. Now one of them was Wildy breaking some tackles, but I mean, how much do you really want to show in these non-con? Even against Montana State, I know how big that game was in the scheme of things, but is it really worth giving away something that you're going to throw an NDSU or UNI to beat Drake by another touchdown? I think what we kind of forget, although I think there are I do think they kind of miss Tucker Kraft a little more for the blocking element of things. And more, I think that gets underrated a lot more than just how good of a pass catcher he was. And I've heard that from other people too. I think they miss his blocking a little more. I think they also miss those linemen, Sanders and Winkleman. But I think those things will come along as time comes. Right. I think we just kind of forget that last year's team was by no means this perfect, beat people by 30 every game. They had a lot of games where they came out pretty flat. I mean, we can talk about that NDSU game, but then the following week, after that emotional win where you think, man, the sky's the limit, they're down 21-7 at North Dakota. And credit the Fighting Hawks. I think they were a playoff team, and I think they're decent, but they shouldn't have been. I mean, they just laid an egg, but then they turned it on. And I mean, this is still kind of every team's still kind of a work in progress. You hope, obviously, with everybody coming back, that maybe they're a little farther along. I think you see it at least with Gronowski. He obviously is in a much better place because he's now had a full year and he's fully healthy from where he was. But I mean, it's like, if you're expecting this team didn't really start to peak until the end of the season last year. They didn't really start blowing people out until after that North Dakota trip. And frankly, I mean, they could have lost to UNI.
Yeah.
That
easy.
I mean, they don't get a leaping penalty. Maybe they do lose to UNI in overtime. So, I still think they're going to be fine. I think the conference is going to be maybe a little more testing. I'm still not quite sold on North Dakota State yet, but they're trying to be a little more dynamic offensively. We'll see if that we'll mention that when we get some other things here. But this is still not a finished product yet. But they're going to come along, I think, fine, and we'll start to learn a few more things. I think, obviously they settled in pretty quickly after that tough start, went right down. I mean, they pretty much scored on every possession after that, which is what you expected. I think maybe where the run defense was a bit of a concern last week, it certainly wasn't. They just overpowered. What times I did get to watch, they were just overpowering on the line. I mean, there were times they were meeting the running back 2 or 3 yards in the backfield after he got the handoff. And again, you kind of expect that. This is a pioneer non-scholarship team and not a good one. I think maybe a little concerning about the passing defense. I saw a comment here that the Bailey kid can sling it, and they did have I don't know. Maybe that's a little. SSU's always had a few problems with deep balls, but.
And I'm sitting next to Matt, the Podfather, and he's fun to watch a game with, and we're sitting there going, it's like 3rd and 20, and we're in the base defense. Like, talk about not showing your cards, but you are opening yourself up to occasionally get dinged on a passing down like that, and that's some of what happened.
Yeah, I agree. So, not too many concerns. I thought obviously Mark Gronowski probably the player of the game. What was it? 5 total touchdowns, or maybe 6. I can't remember. I'll have to look at the numbers here again. Of course, this is probably a pretty emotional game for him. His dad was a quarterback at Drake back in, I believe it was the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty emotional game for my father, too, who's from Iowa. He's now living in Minneapolis. Unfortunately, he couldn't go to this, but he always kind of roots for Drake, so he won't be happy to learn about this score. But yeah, Gronowski with 5 touchdown passes, a touchdown run. So obviously I'm sure Mark is going to kind of enjoy lording over his dad, Ray, tonight, a little bit over that.
Yep.
I thought, I think maybe the best takeaway, because I don't know how much you take away from it when they were just such a clear, you knew this was going to be a mismatch going in. I like the way the backups played. I thought the Western Oregon game, they didn't really look that comfortable. And today it looked like they were a little more ready to go. Obviously, I think Angel Johnson, I want to see more of him. I mean, I know that's kind of a tough ask when, you've got Amar and Isaiah, but man, his speed is just something else, and he's just so nimble. Mm-hmm. And, Chase Mason looked good. I mean, just about every reserve who got in looked good. So I thought they were more prepared. And like I said, I just want to see more of it. Find a way to get him involved, because that kid is – I think, like I said, you have to start kind of grooming somebody, because Isaiah is probably gone at the end of the year. He's basically said as much. He's going to go to the draft. I keep forgetting that Amar is technically only a junior. I feel like he's a transfer for some reason, but he should be back. Now, you never know with the portal. And I know the scouts that I've seen who've come in have said he's starting to crawl up on our board too. It's almost becoming a little like what happened with Isaiah and Pierre Strong in 2021, where Pierre was the name, but all of a sudden everybody's like, who's this Isaiah kid? He looks really good. So, I think they do have to start thinking about those other options. I mean, again, hopefully Amar's back, and you got the Johnson and Johnson combo, and I guess Derek Johnson's another factor too. He's been out all year, but just Angel with his speed. If you could, Wildcat with 3 backs, slot, jet sweeps, something. He is. We've seen that for a long time since he's been playing at Viborg Hurley. He is just a burner, and we even saw. I mean, we saw him once at the start of that Montana State game, and they never pulled it out again. So, I'm kind of hopeful we'll see some packages with him this year once they get to conference play.
Yeah, he's electric when he gets the ball, and like you said, that Montana State game, they came out with that diamond formation with the 3 backs in the backfield, or inverted wishbone, whatever you want to call it, and that looks so dangerous if they decide to start pulling that out regularly in the future. That looks tough to defend, and that'd be a lot of fun to watch.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps up most of the Drake discussion. Again, there wasn't much. Yeah. This was exactly kind of what we expected, aside from maybe the first series of the game. I think that's the most points they scored since putting up the 90 on Arkansas Pine Bluff a couple of years ago. But they're off for 2 weeks now. They will be in action 2 weeks from today against the University of North Dakota. I'm trying to pull up their scoreboard here. They were at Boise State today. I kind of thought maybe they were going to have a chance to stay in that game the whole way with Boise, maybe even pull the upset. But Boise kind of pulled away from them late there. They won that game 42-18. It was close at one point. I think it was like a 10-point game in the third. It was actually, as I'm looking at it now, I think, Boise scored 14 in the fourth quarter, so it was 28-18 going to the final quarter. But I think I kind of wonder how North Dakota does this, because I'm never impressed by Tommy Schuster, yet he gets stuff done. I mean, he was 17-29 for 142 and a touchdown. Their running game, I don't think they necessarily have a big hitter like they did a few years ago, but They have a great receiver in Bo Belquist, who's going to be a bit of a handful. I mean, I think Jackrabbit fans probably remember 2 years ago during that fall 21 season, they had to play North Dakota that final week just to get into the playoffs. After the Hail Mary at USD, and UND had nothing to play for and still nearly came in here and took them to the fourth quarter. And again, much different Jackrabbit team. So, yeah, they can't be overlooked.
No.
I mean, it was it's still a game SDSU should win, and I think they should win by a touchdown or two. But, boy, it's one of those where is Angel – I'm looking at some – is Angel the fastest ever? I don't know if Angel's the fastest ever played SDSU. I would need some consultation on that.
Yeah, that's a strong,
that's a loaded
statement.
Question.
There's been some serious athletes.
Yeah, I think UND will be. It'll be a good way to open conference. Good way to start off at home.
Yeah,
in front of the home fans. And it sounds like it'll be another pretty packed crowd. I mean, I think I've heard that they're already under 1,000 or under 500 tickets, something like that. So.
I think the last because we have guys and we'll do it ourselves doing we call the green dot watch of the tickets.
Yeah, I've seen that.
How many? I think last one I did there was 121 left. Now I don't know if they've released more tickets since then because for some reason they tend to do that occasionally. But it was like 121 on Friday. So that's probably going to do
standing room. I'm assuming at some point they'll do standing room only. I mean. I'd love to see them do something more with that little corner where they have the new wrestling room in, but I'm sure if there's more demand and they keep getting more seats, then they will eventually find more ways to. And now I'm kind of keeping my eye on the game. By the way, if I'm looking.
Right. Oh, I get it. I mean, if you were to add standing room only, I would throw it in where the southwest entrance is in that open corner, and you could put a party deck. you could do a party deck with a bar and a railing for standing room only up there, and that would be kind of cool if I was to do standing room only.
I've just enjoyed they just sacked Shedeur Sanders on 3rd and long, and I've got the Buff fans with their head. They're like their world is coming to, and again, I still expect to lose. I'm realistic,
but the Surrender Cobras are pretty fun to watch. You gotta love Surrender.
But I think there'll be some. Yeah, I mean, if there's enough demand, they'll find ways to cram people in that place, and it'll be fun. CSU is gonna have a full brawl. Well, they did have a brawl at the start of the game a little bit. They were, we can mention some of that later. I want to keep it on topic here before I get too off topic with my own fun.
With UND, the Rams, they're just so different at home compared to on the road, and that seems to be such a pattern with any a really good dome team is really good on the road and really good at home. A good to middling or even a little bit worse dome team like USD has been in the past, or UND, they haven't been terrible, but they haven't been great.
Yeah, and they do have a common opponent, but
difference at home.
They do have a common opponent because UND opened the season with Drake, ironically enough. UND only led that game 14-0 at half, and then they just put it on. They put the Jets on in the second half and ended up winning 55-7. Their other win was also at home against Northern Arizona. So this is gonna be. I mean, obviously they had Boise today. I mean, this is their first. It's a tough one to start off. Obviously, Valley playing, and you're going to a South Dakota State where now, I mean, it's going to be. Just now, this place is becoming a hornet's nest to come to, obviously, with the way the fans are reacting. And then right after that, they get Western Illinois, and then they get the Bison at home. I'll be curious because I think maybe this is the year North Dakota can finally get that win over the Bison that they've been, gunning for. They came close a couple years ago when it was in the Alaris Center.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to happen, this might be the year for it to happen for them. But I think it'll be, again, you can't overlook them, and I don't think Jimmy will. I think they know their history. Elsewhere in the Valley today, the other game that I'm sure some people were maybe keeping a little eye on because it had me raising my eyebrow at half. South Dakota was hosting Lamar. The Coyotes are not a fast starting team, to put it mildly. They were only up 7-6 at half.
That's so bad. That's not good.
It was kind of it was very weird though. Apparently they had like one thing where Lamar started with the ball, I think in the first half, had this big long drive. Guy picks it off for like a 12 play drive, Guy picks it off for USD, then fumbles it back to them. Then they drive down to the one. So they basically used an entire quarter and only got a field goal out of it. So, I mean, there were some really weird things happening kind of in that game for them to be on there. But, yeah, I don't know, Garrett's saying that USD had less than 100 yards. I think there was a thing. Now, they did go on to win 35-6. So they put them away in the second half pretty easily. Mm-hmm. The reason that they only had less than 100, I think you could see they wanted to establish the run game. We talked about that last week. They were so bad running between the tackles. And they did that today. They ran for more than 300 yards. I said they needed to do this last week. They gave the ball more to Nate Thomas. He ran 19 times for 164 yards and 2 scores. Travis Tice had 16 for $120 and 2. So that was no coincidence. I think they absolutely knew. And again, Lamar is not good. They did actually play decently last week against their FBS team. I think they only lost like Monroe by 10. So it was a big improvement over what had happened against Idaho. But they knew they needed to establish a run game. This doesn't mean they have a great run game, but they had to do something going into their bye week. So they did. I mean, bottom line, where USD is at, this is what they had to do. They had to go 2-1. Anything less than 2-1 would have been a disaster with this schedule. I mean, like, I know Bob Nielsen has said this a few times. They've never really had 2 back-to-back home games in non-conference in his tenure, and he's been there 7 years now, I think.
Right.
So they're now in a position, and they're at least winning the games they should. There's some winnable games in their schedule. They're in a position where 5 to 7 wins isn't off the table. Now, can they, pick off now I don't know if they can go out and compete with SDSU or NDSU, but can they go get a UND, or can they go get, who else is on their schedule? Can they go get the UND type game? That might make the difference between making the playoffs or being a 6-7 win team like Youngstown a year ago that didn't get in. And that, somebody's asking about that lineman, because they had a D lineman, Nick Gase, last week, who won the National Player of the Week. He had the 3 sacks against St. Thomas. Looking up his numbers. He looked really good. I'm looking at that number now. Today he had 6 tackles and a sack. Sack. So he had a pretty good game. They had another guy actually named Brendan Webb who had 3.5 sacks. So, I mean, again, I don't know. Again, the same thing that I said with SDSU and Drake. I don't know how many real takeaways you have from this. Right. But there are signs that their defense is getting better. I'll put it like that. I mean, they didn't play that badly at Missouri, and Missouri obviously today kind of showed that maybe they're a little more legit than getting that win over Kansas State. The defensive line is finally showing signs for the first time, maybe in Nielsen's entire tenure, that it can be maybe a push back a little bit. We'll see if they can get some running game going moving forward. But they did what they had to do.
Yeah, they're kind of weird. You said they won the games they should have won so far. But there's levels of games you should win. There's all right, this team's a competitive conference opponent, but you should beat them. And then there's St. Thomas and Lamar. And somehow they managed to make St. Thomas and Lamar look both problematic, but also, we figured it out and it's fine. Back-to-back weeks. So I don't know what to think of them until they start playing Valley play, because they look terrible and they've looked fine. And it's how do you juxtapose those things?
Well, we'll learn a lot about them here in 2 weeks. I think pretty much everybody in the Valley. I don't want to say that for certain, but almost the entire Valley has this next week off.
Yep.
And CSU's marching again. If they go up 28-14, I'm going to go nuts.
Illinois State peed one down their leg today.
Yeah, I'm looking up the. I mentioned USD. We'll learn a lot about them here. They're going to the Bison next week. North Dakota State wrapped up non-conference play. Central Arkansas, who actually received quite a few votes in the top 25, they beat them pretty good, 49-31. Central Arkansas has the former Northern Iowa quarterback Will McIlvain, who named Jackrabbit fans will remember. He actually led them to a playoff win at SDSU in 2019. That was, of course, the year that SDSU had everybody hurt. Right. They were, third-string quarterback, third-string tailback. But they kind of again, it's similar to what we saw with USD just trying to establish the run, and now I'm a little bummed because CSU just fumbled at the CU 10 as we were about to go in. Great.
No. Oh, that'll kill you. That's going to come back and bite you.
Yeah, but same way that USD was trying to establish a run, I can kind of see NDSU showing that they can pass a little bit because Cam Miller in the game went 18-19 for 200 yards and 2 scores. So, they did their typical thing where they ran the ball well. They had 235 rushing. Cole Payton had another nice touchdown run, but it seemed to me like their focus in this game was kind of showing, hey, we can pass the ball too with Cam Miller. Right. He's dynamic. Don't you believe us now? So,
well, I've been stumping for them if they needed to just have him throw more, because he's not, I don't think he's ever going to go down as a great thrower of the football, but he's not a disaster back there either. But if you only give him 5 attempts a game and then say, oh God, we're behind, we need you to throw 20 times,
you got to keep people honest.
A disaster. So I think that's kind of what they're trying to do. You
got to keep defense. You got to keep defenses honest, and then at some point, and then although I kind of look at what happened with Montana State last week with SDSU, like they couldn't stop. They knew what Montana State was going to do, and they couldn't really stop Montana State until it got down to the 1 yard line.
Right,
half the time. So, but I think they are at least looking a little more dynamic offensively. I think with the Payton element that they seem to have finally figured out a way to work him into that offense. So obviously, I think the easy money is I'm sure NDSU is going to be like a 14-point favorite here, and if you were a betting line, I'm sure it's going to be like 2 touchdowns or whatever in a few weeks against USD. But if the Coyotes can run the football, and that's maybe a big if because we know that NDSU's defensive line is still stacked. If they can run the football, I've said this, I do believe Bauman's has got a calmer head on his shoulders than they've had in the past since going back to Strevler or at least Simmons. If they can run the football, I don't think this is an NDSU team that's impregnable. I think they're very beatable. If like same thing with, they certainly haven't faced anybody yet that makes me think that showed me something. I mean, if Central Arkansas is the best team on their schedule, I'm not really. Will McIlvain to me was not that great of a quarterback at Northern Iowa, and he got booted out, within a couple games when Theo Day took over. So, I think we'll learn a lot about NDSU here in the coming weeks, but, it wouldn't shock me if USD gave them a game, at least in that first conference opener. Also wouldn't shock me if they got beat by, I think the last time they played there was that was that time that they actually had a shot to tie for the conference title, and they lost 50-something to 14, so nothing would shock me, but it'll be interesting. Yeah, I've seen the Cam Miller's consistently plays horrible defenses. Well,
if there's one terrible matchup to have going into a game with NDSU that you can't afford to have happen is have a bad offensive line going against their defensive line. And I'm not convinced USD has a decent offensive line, to be honest. And
that's really fair.
Their defense can be as improved as you want, but if they end up being on the field all the time because you're getting 3 and outs and losing the field position game, that's a recipe for disaster.
Well, my one thought is maybe if Nate Thomas is, because he's kind of the, again, if they're meeting him 3 yards in the backfield, that's going to be irrelevant, but he's a little more dynamic. He's a guy who, when he was healthy, he could have been on anybody's roster. That kid was, he's an all-conference kind of player. So he's a guy who can make, and that was the thing with today. They were a little susceptible to the run. UCA had a guy run for 218 yards and 2 touchdowns. They gave up a 71-yard run. It wasn't all garbage time stuff too. So the Bison were a little, this is again, North Dakota State. You're not used to seeing them give up a lot of run yardage. So that's why I said, as good as, and again, they looked fine in the first 2 games, but they didn't really play anybody. Maybe that's something you take out of it, is maybe the Bison defensive line was, maybe this was a bad game, who knows, but there's maybe a little opportunity there. But again, you're right. The Coyote offensive line has to show a lot, and we'll learn a lot. And also fair to remember too that last year they were up by 7 in the Dakota Dome on the Bison. in that game, and they were with them until the fourth quarter, and then it got out of reach for them. They ended up losing by 34-17. But we'll see. I think that could, if something could surprise, it could be maybe that game will be closer than is expected if they lose. And looking around the rest of the Valley, I saw somebody mention Southern Illinois that got a big win. They were getting beat most of that game down at it was actually, I think, the game of the week for a lot of people.
Left.
Yep. They scored a touchdown late, and they win 26-25, and I think that's Nick Baker threw for 458 yards and 3 touchdowns. Had 2 picks. I think those were early, including, I think, that game-winning touchdown with 10 seconds left. I mean, they're in good shape right now. They could legitimately be – they'll play SDSU on the 21st, so about a month. They'll host the Jackrabbits on October 21st, and they could well be 6-0 because they will have Missouri State on September 30th. They'll have Youngstown. They'll be at Youngstown. That's going to be a tough one on October 7th. Then they'll be at Murray. That should be, they've had some games certainly where they've blown it before, but that's at least they're at least going to be 5-1, I think, going into that SDSU game. So that could be a sneaky, tough game, and then that's right before SDSU plays their rivalry games with USD and NDSU. So suddenly that's looking a little tougher for the Jackrabbits, and they didn't have to play Southern Illinois last year. And we of course remember what happened the last time I realized that different SDSU team, but maybe this is the turning point because I thought last year Southern Illinois was going to make a playoff run and be a team that could do something, but then they would always drop some boneheaded game the following week when you thought they were making a statement.
Right. But, and quick point, I do have to put this out there for people watching on Twitter. If you're putting in comments, I apologize. Our software doesn't transfer Twitter comments.
Let's see if I can.
I don't know if they're on there or not. But just as a FYI for people watching on there. But for SDSU, if you're an SDSU fan and you're worried about overlooking Southern Illinois, you actually probably want them to win and be 6-0 or 5-1. So that way, I mean, it's hard to overlook undefeated with 6 games into the schedule because that's going to be a highly ranked matchup if that's the case. And I think that is going to be one that will be one of the toughest games of the season, I think.
Yeah, and it's on the road too. Carbondale's a weird place to play. It's always kind of a tough I think it's one of those tough trips, not quite as bad as going to Western Illinois, but it's not a fun trip. But credit to them. I mean, I think the Valley is at least setting its – last year was kind of a down year for the Missouri Valley, and I think it's setting itself up to be, again, at least 4 teams getting in, maybe 5. And that's good for the league. Obviously, you want to get back to where it was. Somebody's saying here SIU looks a lot like SDSU circa 2018. Maybe. I like their coach. He's an alum. His name escapes me right now, but he's an alum. Nick Hill, I think is his name, if I'm not mistaken.
Nick Hill's the coach. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Jacks do play well there. They went there that COVID year when Stone Labanowitz now. He played the villain perfectly, and they had just beaten NDSU, and they'd ended the Bison's, whatever it was, like 36 game. Yeah. And he said the Jacks were just another big pelt they were going to put on their wall or another big fish they were going to hang. And the Jacks smoked him. It was like 44-3. That was kind of the coming out party for Isaiah Davis because Pierre Strong got hurt that day, or got hurt before that. I think Davis went for 220 in his first start. And the other thing I remember out of that too, I remember 2 things. Number one, that was the week I got COVID and was just terribly ill. And I also remember too, unfortunately, Jabari Gibbs got in that game late and had another ACL or knee injury. I don't know what it was. I felt so bad for that kid because I don't know if he's done anything in Idaho, but he just never caught a break. I think he could have had a good career here, but unfortunately injuries can wreck everybody. So SDSU's played well at Southern Illinois, but and they play well on the road too. They played really well on the road the last 2 years. Yep. Rest of the Valley, Indiana State loses another FBS game, this time to Ball State, 45-7. They're 0-3. That's no shock. Youngstown had a little bit of trouble with Robert Morris, 48-28. I guess it wasn't quite as – so they're 2-1, but they kind of were blowing that game out. Bobby Morris scored a little bit at the end to make it look more respectable. The dud, I think you kind of mentioned this one. Illinois State, they just laid an egg at Eastern Illinois, 14-13. Kind of thought maybe the Redbirds were going to have something cooking, and they still might. But boy, I mean, you got to go for transfer as your starting quarterback, Anixtad, and he throws for 234 yards, 2 picks. They don't have any running game.
When the Valley was at its peak, those were games that it never lost.
Yeah.
And that, I think that I agree with you. The Valley's improved this year, but it's also why I'm not going to go dying on any hills defending the Missouri Valley as the greatest thing to ever walk the earth, because you get past Youngstown State, UND, and it gets awful mediocre, awful fast.
Yep. Yeah, I don't disagree with you there, and I kind of wonder if Brock's back's on a little bit of a hot seat. They haven't really done much in a while. I mean, they made that they could have won that national title game a few years ago against the Bison, and just got to wait. I mean, that was last-minute comeback, but they really have not done anything. And they even had Trey Roberson one more year after that, and they kind of fell on their face. So, I don't know, Brock's back. I mean, I don't know if Illinois State cares that much about football. I mean, they got a decent facility, but he's not really done much since then. And, if there's any budget for it, I would imagine he's starting to feel a little heat. Northern Iowa gets their first win. No surprise, Idaho State's not very good. 41-17 at Idaho State. Murray State lost at Middle Tennessee State. I still have a tough time thinking of Murray being in the Valley. 35-14. Western Illinois, they led this game at half, 31-14 against Lindenwood, who is now Division I. I think they're still technically in their transition. That's Jed Stugart's team. They would get outscored 29-9 in the second half, and Lindenwood wins 43-40. So Western Illinois is now 0-3. Their head coach still has yet to win a game. And I tweeted this out, and I say it again. Have fun with them, Ohio Valley. They're almost yours. I bet you can't wait to add that to your football. I mean, granted, you gave us, Murray State, but jeez, it's just I don't even know how. And I'm happy for Jed Stugart. I loved him when he was at USF, but gosh, I don't even. I'm kind of surprised they're even keeping a football program. I keep thinking it's going to get dropped, and maybe this move to the OVC will keep everything afloat. But there's just that program is just dead. I mean, ever since Nielsen left, I think they had one more playoff year after he left, but it's just been a dead anchor for about 10 years. Yeah, even trade.
Pretty much.
Gopher transfer is as good as a excrement-flavored lollipop. Well, I can't argue with that. And I also, Stone is Labanowitz is a guy you love to hate until you follow his he's been really good. I mean, I'm not surprised he got in the media when you heard him talk when you heard him talk in the press conferences. The one he gave after that SDSU playoff loss was epic. I don't know if anybody had it saved, but I was riveted to that. I'm like, geez, this guy's going to be great. And I genuinely want to check on one or two more things here, because I want to see how Montana did in that game with the defending national D2 champion, Ferris State.
They almost lost. I watched the end of it.
I know they were down 10-3 at half.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, 17-10. Wow. Yeah, they.
Yep.
Ferris
got down to like the 20-yard line with a minute 15 left, and Montana all out blitzed them twice in a row on 3rd and 4th down. And they weren't ready for it, and it just killed them.
Well, again, we still don't really know what Montana is, and I don't, even though they're 3-0, I don't trust them. I mean, Ferris is really good, but that's, they brought Bobby Hawk, who was the coach kind of during their last glory run. I think he succeeded Joe Glenn after Glenn won the national title and then went to Wyoming. And when he was there the first time, this was pre-SDSU and NDSU becoming fully eligible. He was the coach when, of course, SDSU made their first playoff appearance. I don't want to relive those memories.
We don't talk about that.
No, we don't want to talk about it. I'm sure Jimmy Rogers wouldn't want to talk about that either, because I think he was on that team. But
he was. I wouldn't bring it up.
But they made like the national title game 3 or 4 times, I think, with him, or a couple times in a row, and they were just dominant. They owned the league, the Big Sky. They didn't even treat Montana State like they were there. They never scheduled it. And the thing was, the way the playoffs were set up was you could pretty much buy home games. There was no seeding, really, that I remember. And then he left for UNLV, didn't do anything because nobody does anything at UNLV. And they brought him back a few years ago. They're like, we're going to restore the glory. And it really hasn't happened. I think the new world is not treated him well at Montana. And I don't know if it's going to – they're a program that should be a blue blood at this level. But right now I think Brent Vigen's got a better system in place. And they, by the way, they hammered a Pioneer League team too today. So – they're fine. And the other big one that I think come out of the also Idaho nearly beat Cal. They ended up losing that game. I can't remember the score, but again, I say this, Jason Eck and company are coming. I think if they lost 31-17, so they did give up 31 unanswered, but still really like what they're doing. If they'd won 2 FBS games and run the table, they would have been the number 1 seed in the playoffs, unquestionably. But they're tracking right now. I mean, they're Big Sky is going to be fun, I think, to watch. That I don't always say that because they were pretty weak for a few years. But the other big one that was shocking was Sacramento State beat Stanford 30-23, and Sacramento State's former coach Troy Taylor, or Torrey, I can't remember if it's Troy. He went to Sacramento and lost to his old team, and his new school paid them over $600,000. So thanks, old coach.
That's awesome.
That is. And I mean, we'll see if Sacramento State can make a big playoff run. They got, they got at least, I think, to the, I think it was the quarterfinal last year. So they did get, I mean, they're still kind of a team that we've kind of knocked a little bit. They have great regular seasons. They aren't able to put it together in the playoffs. We'll see if they can get a little farther. I would have liked to seen them play NDSU last year. I think it would have been interesting just because of their passing attack. Would have been on the road for the Bison, a long trip to make. And, of course, we saw Incarnate Word really – Incarnate Word could have won that game and maybe even should have. But Sacramento – I mean, again, like I said, Big Sky with Sacramento, Montana State, Idaho. Weber State was kind of hanging with Utah today. Big Sky is pretty loaded at the top.
Yeah, they are. And, I mean, UC Davis has been solid. I didn't see what they did today, so maybe they lost and now I look like an idiot. But
I love Dan. Well, Dan Hawkins. Dan Hawkins' kid is coaching it as I watch this Colorado game because Dan Hawkins was a Colorado coach and his kid Cody was the quarterback the last time they played in Boulder. And now Cody Hawkins is the head coach at Idaho State. Yes,
squeaked by Southern Utah. And
yeah. I was gonna say my game tracker is pretty slow. It still has that game going, but
maybe it is still going.
Yeah, it still says date. I don't know. My game trackers have been weird, but yeah. And meanwhile, as I'm looking up, the score is still 21-14 CSU in the third quarter.
Hang in there.
Oh God. Well, like I said, the CSU fumbled at the 10, but then they blocked or CU missed a kick.
Oh my God.
So I have no idea. I'll give it up to Portland State's defense. They played. Yeah, this was the worst game of the day. They played something called North American University and beat them 91-0. And that was after 3 quarters was the score. So
if you're an FCS team and you played North American, you deserve to get forced into the Pioneer League or D2 and not allowed.
That's probably gonna be their only win of the season. So I guess they wanted to score all the points they could get at that point.
I guess.
So that's a pretty good week. We'll obviously be off next week because everybody in the Valley is off.
Yep.
We'll do this again here in 2 weeks when we have obviously the Valley gets going again. It'll be UND and SDSU playing at 2:00. NDSU and USD, I think they play about 2:30 or 1:30, somewhere in there. They always start about that time up in Fargo. It'll start to get pretty real here, and I tell you, if this game goes into the fourth quarter, it's going to be very real, and maybe I'll post some reaction shots. Man, this is fun. I'm just kind of shocked that I'm sitting here and watching this right now, and I don't want to believe they could actually win, but I do. And
hey, they pull it off. You celebrate like it's the end of the world because you deserve it. They nobody gave him any credit all week. So
no, and I didn't. I've said this before, and I'm dead honest. I wanted to. I mean, you always want to believe. I'm always kind of an optimist, but this program has given me no reason to believe in it for 9 years. I mean, that was the last time they were ranked. And the last time I saw them 2 weeks ago, I mean, it helps they had a bye. 2 weeks ago, they just played so timidly and so badly. They played scared against Washington State at home. And to be fair, Washington State's a lot better now. They beat Wisconsin the other week.
Right.
So obviously the Cougars, led by a former, I think, Augustana assistant, was Jake Dickert also at SDSU, I think, too?
Yes.
Okay, so he's got – so, nice to see a local guy, but
yep.
They just played so badly, and they changed their quarterback this week, which I thought was a good move. And then obviously we know the comments that came out.
Oh yeah.
But I've retweeted this. Did he get that? Oh no, there's a pick. Well, like I said, for them to be going into this game in the fourth quarter, that's all I could have asked for if they're still in this game. So, but I kind of thought that I heard there's an old speech that Norvell had when he was with Nevada in 2018. They were upsetting someone at half, and he says to them, he's like, that other team is pissed off because they think they are better than you. They don't respect you. I don't want you, let them make all the mistakes. Let them play like fools. I'm kind of going verbatim there. But so basically, I mean, like, I know what he said. He's been saying that, what I said about the sunglasses thing. And there was more. Of course, the media ran with the sexy soundbite and took it out of context. He was mainly directing that at his players. I do believe that. But I think he was kind of putting it at CU to kind of maybe make them take it a little, see if he could get them out of it. My thought was it would be better if they were overlooking them, which was what I was kind of hoping, because they have Oregon and USC up next. Maybe the other half it was, okay, get them so not focused on this game, so just crazy about this crazy comment. And I do, again, I don't hate Coach Prime. I kind of hate some of the stuff that's come out nationally about this. I think maybe he kind of he's got his team focused on playing in football, and CSU's made some mistakes in this game. They're obviously not as talented. They've had some bad penalties and they've made some big mistakes, but the team, you can tell they're a little more focused on football, and they're playing for their coach.
Yep.
And it feels like CU maybe. It just feels like maybe they got a little too – maybe they let this get into their heads a little bit, and they're not really – they're more focused on trying to, one-up the team that's across. I mean, I saw Sanders' kid was like – the guy was like – sacked him or something. He stuck his fingers in the guy's face mask afterward. I'm like –
what are you doing?
Yeah, so, I mean, again, as much as I want to hate Deion Sanders because he's coaching my rival – and they come to Fort Collins next year, which is – I honestly want to go to that game, but it's probably going to be an impossible ticket now to get.
Right.
Because they have not played in Fort Collins in 30-some years.
Oh, wow.
Because CSU's stadium was so – I mean, you went to the game with SDSU a few years ago, right?
Nope.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, well –
make that.
I'm sure anyone who's on here will tell you how nice the CSU stadium was. I went out there. That was the first time I'd ever been there. They just built it a few years ago. And I liked our old stadium. It was just kind of right next to the foothills, but it was off campus and it was older. It was, they've got just a beautiful facility, but the old one they couldn't really pay a whole lot to get people to come in, and CU didn't want to come there anymore. So finally they were able, now having a newer facility, they don't play the game anymore. They used to play it at Mile High all the time, but obviously the programs got so bad. Right. Now it doesn't feel Mile High. Now they just want to go back to campus, and now because the conferences are so weird, they can't play it every year. Right. So, it'll be fun to have it. And my hope for this game was, well, can we at least play them close and give me some hope that next year when they come to Fort Collins in what could be the final one ever, because again, you just don't know what college football is going to look like. Right. Give me some hope that next year we can beat them when we finally have them in our place with our own crowd there. Right. And I've certainly got that, but man, this is it's fun. It's just fun to. I'm very proud. Whatever I've never needed a football result to reaffirm how proud I am of my school. But this gives me hope moving forward, win or lose tonight, because they just. CU's got a ridiculous amount of talent. And they've got a good. I think I don't know how much coaching Deion actually does. I think he's got a really good staff around him, but they're playing hard and they're hanging with a team that I really didn't think they'd have a chance to. So how conflicted was I when SDSU stopped? I was not really all that conflicted. My wife's here. You heard her laughing. She's an
I
SDSU
can hear you
alum.
laughing. She is cackling. That's awesome. She was giggling. Not good there.
We went to that. It was part work, part just pleasure. I mean, I also visited some family, and I hadn't been to a CSU game in 8 years or so. You got to understand that was a different coach at the time. They had Steve Adazio, who was in his second year. I hated that hire with a passion. It was a horrible hire. Urban Meyer recommended him.
Oof. Yeah, that's not.
This was pre-Jacksonville, and he's kind of Urban's boy. And we paid. CSU's never going to play them again. And NDSU also beat him a couple years ago as well. It was like 2012. So Sacramento State beat him just as badly a year ago, I think, too.
Right.
Right. But I was not on board with the Steve Adazio hire. He was a bad hire. I went on some podcasts with some fan sites. I told them SDSU's really good, guys, and I think this could get. I think SDSU was going to win. I didn't think it was going to be as bad as it was. I'm like, as much as it hurts, I just think SDSU's better, and they were, and they killed them. But it didn't conflict me because I didn't like Steve Adazio. I didn't like the direction he was taking the program. Now it would be a little more because I'm still a little on the fence. I don't know much about Norvell. I think he's better. He's done better than the last guy. But yeah, I mean, it hurts to see my alma mater lose. But I knew they were trash, and I knew it was not heading a good place. And I'm like, I'd rather see SDSU win this game because they've got bigger things, and I feel like they could actually go somewhere. It just had to give me a heart. Appreciate that. So it was not that much of a conflict for me. I knew that was a sinking ship in 2021. Now it might be a little different because I feel like they might have a future. I keep hoping for it, but hey, we'll see. I think, that was fun. It was just fun going back. It was fun going to that stadium. It was fun seeing SDSU win. They earned it and they played well. And I was happy for SDSU, and they fired Adazio at the end of the year, so it contributed. Right. Contributed to what needed to happen. So,
yep. Well, we'll let you get back to your big game. So, thanks.
Yeah, I think Steve's going to tie it here in about a second or two. But yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks for having me on again. I didn't think we'd go an hour, but turns out we did have a decent amount to talk about. So, and if I promise you, folks that are watching me, I will post some crazy ass thing if they win this game. They're going to the fourth quarter with the lead. I think they're going to end the quarter on 3rd and goal for CU right now. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but all of Yankton will probably hear me in the next hour if CSU wins this game. And we'll see if I'm actually able to come back from this because I don't know. This is a truly weird feeling.
This. The people who watch this tomorrow, because we had a lot of people watch this last time. All the people that are going to be watching this
I can't see what the numbers are
going to be sitting there going, oh no, or they're going to be, oh, he's going to be, and it's going to be great.
Look, I'll tell you this, full disclosure, I still don't think they're going to win. Look right in my eyes. I'll even take my glasses off. I do not think they're going to win. CU is still the better team. CU still has more talent. I don't expect it. But we're here now. Crazier stuff's happened. So, if they lose, it's not going to it'll suck. But, I thought they were going to lose 42-7. The spread was 24.5. Everybody has been ripping my school for the last week, telling us we were going to get our ass kicked. Excuse my language, granted. Like I said, I'm proud of the way they played tonight. I just wanted them to be competitive, and they've more than done that. So if they win, it's gravy and we shock the world, and it's one of the biggest wins in the history of the program. And hopefully it sets them on either way. I think it's at least given me reason to hope that they're on a better path. And, much as I've said, there's a lot of very winnable, much as I've said with the Coyotes, with the rest of the Valley, there's a lot of winnable games in the Mountain West where you can get to 6 or 7 wins, which, again, you get to 6 or 7 wins, you're in the bowls, which is why, again, another reason I'm saying the FBS is overrated, people. So, enjoy the FCS and competing for a championship.
Absolutely.
Good note to end on.
I think that's a great note to end on. So thanks everybody for joining us. Give it a share or follow. Obviously, follow Zach on Twitter. Go CSU Rams.
Believe.
I'd love to see him win too.
Shock
Believe.
the world. Shock them. Shock.
All right. Thanks
Night,
a lot
everybody.
for joining us, guys. Night.